Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to the Half Hour Podcast. I'm Bryan, the creator of Half Hour. My goal here is simple, to add real value to your day, to help you learn, to help you lead, and to help you level up in your leadership journey. Whether it's a new perspective, a real-world example, or something you can put into practice right away. To check out my past episodes, go to itshalfhour.blog/podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your network. Let's get started. In this episode, we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about the practice of presence and like what it is to be present. I'm going to talk a little bit about vulnerability as a leadership tool. That's something that I've really practiced a lot, and I've done a lot of research and reading on, and in my own personal journey, vulnerability has really helped me. And then we're going to talk about the rehearsal room as an ethical space. I've really talked a lot about ethics recently, and I think it's a really important topic that we don't talk enough about. So I'm going to talk about those three things. So if you're interested in that, stick around. I hope you stay around to the end, and I hope that you find value. And if you do, please give me a like and subscribe and share it with your network. I'd really appreciate that. So let's get into it. I recently wrote an article about presence and about being in the room and what it's like whenever you are a part of something and something magical happens and it just feels like it's not acting anymore. That could be an actor in a rehearsal room. It could be a tech moment where you're looking at some really amazing lighting moment that just ties everything together. It could even be a stage manager or a technician that is doing something that is just everyday, pedestrian, part of their job, but you see it in a different light and you see the value that it brings. So I kind of want to go off of that. And you know what that's like. You've been in the room, in a rehearsal room or a tech rehearsal, and everyone's running on caffeine and fumes, and you've been working 12-hour days for 2 weeks or longer, and your energy is clipped, but people are focused, and then something just kind of breaks through, kind of like what I was saying, and you see something, and you experience it, and it doesn't feel rehearsed, it doesn't feel like anything, but it just feels really real. That's the power of presence. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, is this idea of presence that isn't staged and it's not forced, but it's just honest. It's who we are. And it really connects to my last podcast and what I'm really trying to explore more in my writing. And that is about like the values and who we are as people and as humans, and how we bring that into our work as leaders and stage managers and production managers and technical directors. How do we bring that piece of us that is who we are into our work, and that really allows us to fully embody and be authentically who we are as leaders? And whenever I get into that place and I connect with who I am, and then I see other people connecting in that same authentic way, it always makes me think, this is why I do this work. And I tell people that all the time, is that my approach is very human first, and I truly believe that we have to treat people like people first before we treat them as actors or stage managers or a person doing a job. That we're always humans first. We all have the same needs. And we all understand what that is and what it's like to be human, because we're all humans. We have to remember that. And I've often framed theater as essential, and I still believe that. And I wrote an article about phenomenology a while back, and it's really the study of existing in space and what it is to be in this physical world. And not only that, but I think just studying theater and theatrical history and how how we use theater as a tool to share really hard ideas and to talk about really sensitive topics that are often really difficult to do in a normal environment. Theater really becomes the vehicle for us to be able to tell these stories. And now in 2025, we have a lot of vehicles that are tied to live performance, like movies and music and audiobooks and, podcasts, ways that we can connect to people that is about storytelling, that is about, being able to talk about these ideas that are really important and that need to be talked about, but that need a special kind of way to do it. And I think that's really what theater gives us. And that's why it's so disheartening to see the defunding of a lot of arts programs and theatrical programs, is because people feel like the arts aren't important, but that is essential to our existence. It really is. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is the practice of presence. And I think presence, I don't know what people think about presence or how they think about it, but it's not being the loudest person in the room. And it's not about having charisma. It's not about, being like, it's not even about being the smartest person. I think when I think of presence, it's about alignment. And it's about aligning your mind and your body. And I'm going to go one step further and aligning our values at the same place at the same time. And that sounds easy, but it's really difficult. And I think that we get so caught up in the physical, embodied work, showing up to work and sitting at a calling desk and, watching what's happening on stage and, being a participant in that, I think, is sort of like the body part. But the mind part, which I think, we do out of habit because, we have to like mentally be there. We have to like have some sort of investment there, and we have to, physically be, mentally engaged in what's going on. I think that's, no pun intended, a no-brainer. But I think having this awareness mentally is what I'm talking about. This awareness about how you're feeling, when you're stressed, what your triggers are, how does your body feel? Does it get warm? Do you get red? Do you start sweating? What are those embodied things that occur whenever you get into moments that feel stressful, that feel bad, that feel good, and you're happy or you feel supported? What are all of those ranges of things that go on with your body? And I think having some sort of mental awareness about that can really, really make a huge difference in how you respond. And then also, the values. I think like being aware, defining what those values are, and how does all of that connect to your mind and your body. It's easy to forget that in theater and leadership, we're constantly managing chaos. But, presence is something that we can practice. Being present is a practicable skill. And for me, like I'm saying with, sort of being aware, it starts with noticing my defaults. And this takes a lot of work to really understand, define, identify, be aware of what those defaults are for you. How do you respond in certain situations? What do you go back to? And I think that will really help you whenever you start to define what those code of ethics are for you and what those values are, what it truly is important to you. Something that I wrote in mine is that I'm committed to introspection and exploration in order to broaden my perspectives. And that reminds me that presence starts with awareness. Before I ever walk into a room, I check in with myself. Where am I today? How am I feeling? What am I bringing into this room, into this rehearsal? Am I bringing in what this room needs? And in the broader sort of the service aspect, which is how I define my leadership style and what I think is really important to me, translation, orchestration, and service are the three words that I really use to describe my leadership. And what is serving this room? What's serving these people? What's serving this production? Am I here? Am I present right now? Am I stuck in the last meeting? Am I stuck in what just happened on the freeway? Am I stuck in something that happened in my personal relationship? Is there an email that I haven't seen? I think just like sort of taking like an inventory of like where I'm at in the moment as I'm walking in. And someone who has written a really great book and outlines a lot of what presence is an author named Amy Cuddy. And I'll leave a link to the description to this book in the show notes, so check that out. But in her book, which is aptly called Presence, she writes that our bodies change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes. And that's so powerful to think that we have so much control over what can happen, but we have to be aware and conscious of what those things are. And she talks about power poses. And if you don't know what a power pose is, it's essentially like a superhero pose. Like your hands on your hips or your hands above your head, like when people win a race and like, yes, I won. That's kind of like a power pose. And I've tried this power pose thing before production meetings. And the first time I ever did it, it was like really uncomfortable, like felt really silly, like why am I doing this? But it really does work. 2 minutes of standing tall, hands on your hips, shoulders back. It's not about posturing at all. It's about aligning your body and supporting your intention for what you're trying to do and how you want to embody that in the meeting. It really pumps yourself up. And I've done this in bathroom stalls. I've done this in an office. I've done this in like before interviews. I do it all the time. Whenever you're stepping into a space where you have to lead, even if you don't feel ready, I think that you can kind of get your body there and like trick your brain into doing that. And I think that this is a really helpful way. So check that book out. Super helpful. They have an audiobook for it. You can buy it in all kinds of formats. So it's definitely it's definitely helpful. So check that out. The next thing I want to talk about is vulnerability as a leadership tool. Vulnerability has really opened up a lot for me. And I've read Brene Brown is really the pioneer in really exploring vulnerability and how it's connected to building trust and connection and stuff like that. And so I will link all of her books. Actually, I have an article that are like the top 10 book recommendations. And I wrote an article about that on Half Hour and have all the links in there. So I'll just link that article in there and you can check out some of those books and how they're related to this podcast. So, we talk about holding space a lot, and sometimes you need to hold space for yourself too. And I think that is often forgotten, especially as stage managers and production managers and production leadership in general. One of the boldest leadership moves that I've ever seen someone do is admitting, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but let me figure it out. And that like asking for help really shows a lot of strength. Not a lot of people would necessarily do that. They might pretend that they know and then in private, like freak out and try to figure out so that they can come back and know that they want people to know. But that's not weakness. That is presence. That's vulnerability in action. And, like asking for help, saying, I'm not really sure what to do here, or I need help with this. Can you help me with this? And just connecting this back to ethics and values, something that I wrote in my own is I actively practice vulnerability within the group, the community, and myself. And for me, this means showing up even when I don't have it all together, when I don't have all the answers. It means giving feedback with care and receiving it without defense. And that's a really hard thing to do. That's, it's so easy to say. But I think that like giving and receiving feedback, and I'll explore this in another episode, and I have explored this a lot in my writing, so you can definitely check that out on itshalfhour.blog. But the whole feedback piece of it is definitely a tricky thing. But vulnerability creates room for others to be real, just like I'm being real. It opens the door to connection, and that's what Brene Brown talks about, is how this seemingly like really insignificant moment of opening up and being vulnerable really opens the other person up to wanting to reciprocate that. And that's what leads to connection. And Brene Brown talks about these marble jar moments as she talks about it. She has a story about her daughter and how she's in this class, and every time someone does something good, there's a marble that goes into this marble jar. And every time they do something that you don't like or that hurts your feelings, you take a marble out. And the more marbles you have in, that represents the amount of connection and trust you have with someone. And connection is really built in these tiny, insignificant moments, not these big grand gestures that you think really build trust, but it's really about showing up, and it's about being there, and it's about connecting with people every moment that you show up and every time that you're there. So vulnerability can be a huge leadership tool. And I think that some people get it wrong with vulnerability. And I think that like oversharing everything about who they are and like where they're from and what they like and don't like. And it's like a waterfall, and it's too much. And I think that can create the opposite effect. So I think that, being vulnerable is a tool, and it's a way for you to open up connection with people, but don't get the wrong idea of it. So read Brene Brown's books. She has like 5 or 6 different amazing books, and they sort of all build on each other in a way, but you don't have to read one after the other. So huge supporter of that. Next thing I want to talk about is the rehearsal room as an ethical space. And rehearsal is more than just preparation. It's sort of an experiment, and it's culture in action. And because if you think about it, like you get a group of people in a room, potentially, most likely this group of people for the first time ever. There might be some people who work together or that know each other or familiar, but this group of people, aligned towards this one vision of putting on this production. It's a culture, and it's a microculture that you're building from day one. And if presence is a practice, then rehearsal is where we rehearse not just a play, but the way we treat each other and how we connect with each other. And we model the room that we want every day by showing up the way that we want to show up. And connecting this back to my values again, what I wrote in my code was that I assess my goals and norms and adjust my roles and relationships in service of the evolution of the group. And you have to respond to the people that you're with, the people who are right in front of you. And you might want things to be going a certain way. You might want someone to react a certain way. You might want to react in a certain way. But sometimes that's not how it works. Sometimes you have to adapt. And I've written a lot about this called adaptive challenges. And it's there in a few of my articles. And I think I actually did a podcast with my good friend Nico, episode 1, in fact, where we talked about adaptive challenges. So go back and listen to that and check out some of my stuff on Half Hour. But that's how it kind of manifests, is like you have all of these things happening and you have all these adaptive challenges. And I think that the way that we show up and the way that we're present can really help with those adaptive challenges. It's 100% adaptability, but it's also ethics. It's choosing the kind of room that you want to lead, the kind of culture that you want to build. And as a stage manager, we set the tone. We don't just run the show, but it's by the way that we listen, the way that we call, the way that we pause, the way that we listen to other people and what's happening and what we see and how we respond. So it really is an ethical space if you think about it. Just to review what I talked about, we become what we practice. If we practice panic, we'll perform panic. But if we practice presence, we can lead from alignment. This isn't just about making shows. It's about building spaces and culture where people can be seen, where honesty has room to breathe, and where we can connect and have difficult conversations. You don't have to be perfect to be present. You just have to be willing to show up, to be who you are. And then when you show up with your authentic whole self in your body, in your breath, in your values, in your mind, the room feels it. It feels different. And that can translate into the kind of leader that you want to become. So thank you so much for checking this episode out. If you liked it, please give it a like, comment, share it with your network. I would truly appreciate that. And see you in the next one.